breaking news, Nottingham Forest have failed in their attempt to get their 4-point deduction overturned or reduced as their appeal is unsuccessful to an independent commission after the Premier League found them guilty of various FFP and PSR breaches. Hey guys, and welcome to the channel. Welcome to another video. Yesterday's video is going to centre around Nottingham Forest and the unsuccessful appeal that Forest have pledged to an independent commission as the result and the outcome of their appeal is heard, that they have been unsuccessful in overturning or reducing their 4-point deduction that they received earlier on in the season for breaches of PSR. We're going to be talking about this, we're going to be talking about this story and everything else in between. But before we go any further, I would like to remind you all to please like the video and also subscribe if you're new. Both things are always incredibly greatly appreciated. Get involved in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts, comments, opinions, predictions, feelings, whatever you want to call it in regards to this story down below. But without further ado, let's go on talking about it. Let's go on talking about the news, the big breaking news today that Nottingham Forest have failed in their attempt to reduce or overturn their 4-point deduction for breach of Premier League financial rules. We've heard a lot about PSR this season. We've heard it in regards to Everton and Nottingham Forest mainly, who the Premier League seem to be making prime examples of. And obviously we've heard a lot about it because now a lot of teams are worried about it, because a lot of teams are now checking all of their paperwork and making sure that they are not in breach of that, because the Premier League does seem to be clamping down on it, and rightfully so. They should be clamping down on it. But it just seems like Everton and Forest right now are the ones to be made examples of first, whilst we wait obviously for the likes of Chelsea and Manchester City and those kind of situations to sort themselves out. We can obviously focus on the ones that are seemingly minor in comparison, but still are pretty serious in obviously the way that they have breached various Premier League regulations. We know that they're not innocent. We know that Everton aren't innocent either. And we know that obviously the punishments are there to be given out. But what we will say is that in this kind of situation, Forest feel hard done by. And I can somewhat understand why. A newly promoted team last season came up with a squad that was being absolutely torn apart. You could say it's mainly down to their own doing, but it was mainly being torn apart by contracts coming to an end and loan deals and all sorts of things of that nature. Players not wanting to play for Forest anymore, all of that kind of stuff, in which they had to get rid or sell on or whatever the case, or send back from their loan of certain players. And they had to obviously bring in an entire fresh new squad. That was always going to be difficult in itself. The amount of praise they got for doing it was a little strange. It did seem a little strange that this was like the only newly promoted side that hadn't been in the Premier League for a number of years, by the way, and obviously only came up via the promotion places, actually came up to the Premier League and started splashing the cash. It wasn't like it was a Fulham of a few years ago or an Aston Villa of a few years ago, in which they were already Premier League material that just had an off-season, went down, but then yo-yoed back up again. So obviously somewhat justify why they could spend so much. Forest were just spending cash at will, pretty much. Whether it be on wages or whether it be on transfer fees. They obviously had a lot, produced a lot, and it was enough to keep them afloat. Now, some Forest fans may say it was worth it. It was worth, obviously, breaching those rules just to stay up, but that doesn't make it fair on everybody else. Look at the 3 newly promoted teams this season. Look at the Burnleys, the Sheffield Uniteds, who are already down. Burnley, like I say, who are... they're pretty much down. They would probably be pretty much down this weekend. Given the way that obviously the fixtures are rolling right now. And obviously Luton, who aren't out the question of performing a great escape, but are looking pretty much down as it is. They've barely spent anything, either of those teams. Burnley maybe, because maybe they've got a bit more credit in the bank from obviously being in the Premier League previously for a number of years, before obviously the off-season in which they've yo-yoed back up. But yeah, you can just see that those Sheffield United and Luton in particular, barely any money spent since returning or gaining promotion to the Premier League. So how does that make it fair? And I guess that's the bigger picture here, is it's not fair on those newly promoted sides, which is why we've probably had the least competitive promoted three in recent Premier League history. The reason why they've been so poor, and the reason why Sheffield United have been like pretty much pumped every single game and have conceded over 100 goals this season, and the reason why Burnley are pretty much down, and the reason why Luton, despite giving it their all, are pretty much down, is mainly because these FFP rulings don't normally favour those that are making the leap from the Championship to the Premier League. You have to spend a lot of money to compete. I agree there probably are going to be exceptions to those rules. There are probably going to be times where you could look at and go, well, this promoted side managed to survive, and this promoted side managed to survive, and this promoted side managed to go on and grow and going from strength to strength throughout the years. But it doesn't happen often enough, and the competitive nature of the Premier League is somewhat watered down because of that. It's somewhat watered down because of these rulings. And as we know from this particular story alone, Forest, it could have been a lot worse for Forest, admittedly, but I think thanks to their early plea, the fact that they were in the Championship for a good couple of years during that time frame that they're talking about, and obviously with their seemingly excellent communication and excellent sort of work with the Premier League to obviously help with the investigation, they managed to get off a little bit easier than maybe what Everton did. In terms of obviously Everton's two punishments being pretty severe in that terms in that aspect. But again, doesn't exactly make it right what they did, but again, it doesn't exactly paint a good picture for the Premier League that the competitive nature of that is like that. But of course, the main bulk of this story is obviously centering around a particular transfer of Brennan Johnson for just under 50 million. Now, I've constantly gone on record and said that whoever got that deal done at Forest deserves a major promotion, a huge raise, because that is an incredible piece of business that you managed to sell him for just under 50 million. I think the overall figure came to something in the approximation of 47.5 million. A fantastic piece of business, but the guidelines are there for a reason. And if you miss those guidelines, and again, it's so cruel and it's so harsh, and it does need looking at, because Forest's argument is that if they'd have sold him earlier, they wouldn't have got that 47.5 million to benefit not only the Premier League but to obviously themselves. I 100% get that, and I think it is wrong. I think it is stupid, particularly when you consider that other teams that have been in the Premier League for a number of years and they've just been hanging around mid-table or even beyond can obviously spend seemingly as much as they like, because obviously they have that TV rights and revenue coming through, and they obviously have the big name players, and obviously inflation goes up and whatever other kind of financial terms you can think of. It doesn't make it right for their newly promoted sides, and it needs to be looked at, definitely. But at the same time, you know, the rules are there for the taking, and it's a tricky situation, because you I hate to look at it and look down at it as me being a supporter of a team that's in a very wealthy and very well-off financial position, both in terms of history and in terms of the here and now aspect of it, and being like, you know, we look down on these newly promoted teams, we look down on teams that are in lower divisions. But it's also one thing to say, well, you know, if we messed up in this way, we'd also be found guilty of it. So it is kind of tricky being a fan of a bigger club and being like, you know what, they deserve to be punished for it. They deserve this, because you do feel sorry for them that they would have to do this. And again, they don't have to, but if you want to try and compete and survive, you've got to try and bend the rules a little bit. And obviously Forest have tried that seemingly and have got caught. doesn't make it right, doesn't make it any way better, and it's probably harsh on the teams that A, got relegated last season, and B, the teams of this season, because your whole Premier League stance as of right now is built upon cheating, essentially, because you did it last season, didn't get found out, survived, and now this season you're building upon those kinds of foundations. It's a really weird and tricky situation, and I admit I'm not explaining it in the best possible way at all. So there are probably better financial experts out there that can explain it more than me, and I would advise you to do your own research on it and go out to check it out. But yeah, it's a strange situation. It's not necessarily fair on Forest or on any of the teams that have been relegated these past several years. But at the same time, it is what it is now, and I think it's been dealt with. I think this is the last we'll hear of it. I think Forest will just take it on the chin now, because I think they'll see it as, well, we're safe now, so there's nothing really we can really say on it. Again, doesn't make it any less right, but there you have it. I think Forest are pretty much safe and sound. Obviously, the last couple of weeks will confirm that, but, you know, they've got Chelsea this weekend in the penultimate game of the season. They could fancy their chances of getting something from that game. I know they are 3 points clear of the drop zone as things stand right now. So they could fancy their chance of getting something from that game. I know Chelsea are in a bit of form right now, and I know they are chasing down Europa League. So it could make for a very intriguing game, this one. But I would personally see that, you know, whether it be this weekend or next weekend when Forest take on Burnley, which, you know, depending on how Burnley do this weekend, could be a massive clash for the final game of the season in terms of the relegation battle, of course. Forest are pretty much safe. I think Burnley are going to be doomed. Luton, unless they manage to pull our rabbit out of the hat over the course of the next couple of weeks, I think they're doomed. And it's not necessarily fair on those newly promoted teams, but it is something that the Premier League do need to look at and do need to obviously. And I know there are going to be changes to the financial aspects and the financial caps of some of these teams that are going to be introduced going forward. I don't know if that will be enough for the newly promoted sides and for the lesser clubs in the Premier League to stand a chance. It's obviously going to be interesting to see how that develops and unfolds. But yeah, it's been a season in which it has been very, I wouldn't say non-competitive by those teams. I mean, by Sheffield United, they were doomed before they even began, really. But for like Burnley, who have made a bit more of a fight about it in recent weeks, and obviously Luton, who have fought for everything this season, but they're just simply not good enough, it seems. It's harsh on them. It's very, very harsh on them. So we'll see, obviously, how everything unfolds, but I expect this to be the last we hear about Nottingham Forest and the current state of the PSR breach that they have obviously failed in their attempt to try and overturn here. I felt it would be maintained, to be fair. I didn't think they'd get it reduced or completely overturned. I did see it being maintained. And that's exactly what has happened. Forest's 4-point deduction remains, but I don't think it will necessarily matter in the context of them either going down or staying up this season. I think they will now stay up in the Premier League and maintain their Premier League status for another season. There you have it, guys. Those are just the thoughts, comments, opinions, predictions, feelings, whatever you call it, of this guy. I want to know what you guys think. What do you make of Nottingham Forest and the unsuccessful appeal that they've had to their 4-point deduction that they received for breaching FFP and PSR earlier on in the season? Let me know your thoughts, comments, opinions, predictions, feelings down below in the comment section. Let me know what you guys think and feel down there. Otherwise, hit the like button on the way out if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you're new and want to see more content like this. Both things are always and forever greatly appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening. I've been Fletch. This has been another Fletch Talks video, and I'll see you all again soon in another video or live stream or whatever it may be. Cheers, guys. Thanks everyone for watching. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day. Speak to you again very, very soon.